Hey everybody, this is Sean with Tab Performance. Today I'm going to be installing the Arnott Ultimate Ride Suspension Kit on our 21 Indian Chieftain. Okay, step number one, we got to get some stuff out of the way. We'll have to take off the side covers and the bags on both sides. So to do that, we'll just pull these out. Disconnect the wiring harness that controls your locking mechanism from the bags. Then we can open up the bags and we'll remove the two bolts that hold the bags on, and those require a 6mm Allen. Now we can remove the lower right hand side cover. To do that, we'll just pull this out. If you have foot pegs, you'll have to remove that passenger foot peg. That's just an 8mm Allen to remove that bolt that holds in the peg. Back that out, take the peg off, then you can remove this. The antenna is just held on with a nut, so just go ahead and back that nut off the stud that it's on. It's an 8mm socket to get that nut off. And there's a couple pieces here, so you want to pay attention to what comes out. So we'll have the nut, then we'll have a bigger washer. On some models, behind the bigger washer there'll be a smaller washer, and then the antenna connection right there, and you can just pull the antenna back out. With the antenna out, now we can move on to the trim. Alright, so not all models will have this trim, and not all these models will have this rear section trim here, but if you do have this section, what you have to do to remove it is loosen the bolts that hold on the mufflers. We don't have our mufflers on for an unrelated reason. You don't need to take the mufflers completely out. You'll just loosen those bolts there. It should be a 13mm socket to get those out. So just loosen those up, and that'll allow you to slide that out of there. And then when those are loose, there's another bolt up here that is a 10mm. And you do want to be careful. There is a bushing on the inside of the trim, so just be aware that that might fall out when you take that off. To get the seat off, there's two bolts, one on each side. That bolt requires a 6mm Allen to back out. Now we can remove our bag supports. Just take that little rubber bushing out. You'll see a nut on the inside of there. To get that out, we'll use an 11mm socket. Alright, to finish up the trim, we'll take off the remaining bolts. There's two here, and then there's the two pins that the side covers slide over. These two up here, those are a 10mm socket. These bottom two are a 12. On the opposite side, we'll have the same two here, but the two on the bottom are going to be Allen bolts, and those require a 6mm Allen on the opposite side. And these pins are actually a 13, not a 12. Next, we can loosen the two bolts that are holding the fender to the frame in the back here. Kind of hard to see, but there's just two of them underneath, right on the side, on both sides. We don't need to back them completely out. We'll just get them loose enough, and that'll give us enough play to shift the fender to give us room to do what we need to do later on. Those two bolts will be a 13mm socket or wrench. Now we'll do the two on the other side. With the fender loose and pushed back, you can see why we did what we did. So right inside there you can see the lower shock nut. We'll have to back that out here in a second. Before we'll do that, we'll remove the air fill nut. That is a 22mm. Next, we'll take our center stand and jack the bike up just high enough to get all the weight off the shock. And once all the weight's off, we'll back out the top and bottom bolt that hold on the shock and then get the shock out. The bolt will take a 17mm socket, The nut on the back side will take an 18mm socket or wrench. So this bottom one is a little bit more difficult. Same thing, it's just the bolts flipped around. So we'll use the 17mm socket on the bolt head on the inside, and then we'll use the 18mm socket on the outside. And that one is kind of hard to reach, like I said, so all I did was I grabbed the ratchet on the inside there and just let it hang there, and then I broke this one free, and then as you loosen it, the ratchet will catch on the tire, so you don't need to hold it in there. Just let it stop on the tire and you should be able to back that out. Alright, now we can move on to the installation process of the Arnott components. We'll start with the compressor. Before we get that installed, we'll kind of get it prepped a little bit. So we'll take the two hex head bolts from the mounting kit. One of them will go down here in the bottom, the other one will go in this slotted hole. The one on the bottom will have the ground attached to it, and that's the ground coming off the compressor itself. So just be aware of that before you get that installed. Then we'll go underneath the bike and I'll show you where this needs to go. So it might be kind of hard to see, but it is pretty straightforward. So we're just going to take the compressor and we're going to attach it with the hex head bolts to these threaded holes in the frame right here. The slotted side will go to the left, the one with the hole will go on the right hand side, and again we will have our black ground wire attached to that as well. Alright, next we can take our supplied red wire extension, plug it into the red wire coming off the compressor. Then we can take our 1/4 inch air line, insert it into the compressor, and then we can bundle these two together with the supplied split loom, and then we'll route it underneath, back up to underneath the seat. Now we can go ahead and get our shock prepped for installation. So this will fit 2014 to 2021 Indian touring, bagger, and cruiser models. One thing to note is that in 2020 and 2021, Indy did make a change to the diameter of the bolt that they used to bolt the shock to the frame. They made it bigger, so as you can see, the bolt just slides right into the stock bushing there. But on 2014 to 2019 models, the bushing is a little bit smaller, so if you try to use the stock bolt inside that stock bushing that this comes with, it's not going to work. So if you have a 2020, 2021 model, you'll have to buy the additional bushing accessory kit that will allow you to use the stock bolt. It'll fit right in there just like that. So just keep in mind, if you have a 20 or 21, you'll need that additional accessory kit. It's pretty easy to change out. So we already have it installed in this side, so we'll just show the installation process here for this bushing on this other side. Just take a screwdriver, and we can take the bushings from the kit, push them in place, and then now we can reuse our stock bolt. Okay, now we can get the airline prepped. We're going to take the supplied threaded boss, just thread it in the side that's got the threaded hole. We can pull out that keeper. Then we can take the 4mm airline, push that into the boss until it seats. Then we can back that out just to verify that we have it seated properly. There we go. Make sure that keeper's in place. Then we can tighten it down with a 10mm wrench. Now we can get the Arnott shock installed. We'll do the Voss and airline facing towards the inside of the bike. Just slip that in there. Just do your best to get it lined up. You may need to take a screwdriver or something just to pull this where you need it to be to get our bolt through. Remember, on the bottom one, the bolt will come from the inside out and the nut will be on the outside. And the top one will be the opposite. The bolt will be fed through the outside and the nut will be on the inside. Now we can go ahead and get these tightened down. The bolt will take a 17mm. The nut on the back side will take an 18mm. And again, same as before, I just have the ratchet hanging on the bolt on the back side. When I start to tighten this nut down, the ratchet will catch on the frame and then that'll hold it in place so I can get it tightened down. Alright, once you have the shock installed, you can do one of two things. If you're installing the included switch, you can go ahead and actually get the manifold prepped for installation. I'm going to be installing the switch that's not included. It's a digital gauge, just an additional accessory that can be used in place of the switch that's included. It'll just allow you to see the exact air pressure that you're running in the shock. So I'm going to get this installed first, because along with this there's a couple extra things that I need to attach to the manifold itself that you won't need to attach if you're using this, so that just takes up a little bit more room. So I'm going to get this installed. Once I have everything where I want it to go, I'll get this prepped and then we'll get the manifold installed. Alright, now we'll get our handlebar mounted switch installed. It's just going to bolt right into our clutch perch, so we'll back out that bottom bolt, put the bolt back in with the switch in place. The process is pretty much the same for both the digital and the one supplied in the air ride kit. So we'll back that bottom one out. That's a 5mm Allen. Take the stock bolt, bolt it back in place. If you're using the one supplied in the kit, you'll take the supplied spacer along with the supplied longer bolt. That way it'll push it out just far enough so you have more clearance here in the housing. Alright, last thing for the handlebar mounted switch, it can be powered by any 12-volt wire on the bike. That's only powered when the ignition is turned on. So I decided to tap into the accessory line. That one's just attached to the same line that I think this is for either a heated seat or a tour pack. But either way, just take the supplied tap, tap into the white wire there, and again, you don't have to do this one. That was just easiest for me. You can do any 12-volt or wire with 12-volt capacity when the ignition is turned on. Alright, with that installed, next we can route the wires. What we'll do is we'll just zip tie it along the handlebar here, come up underneath the tank. So we're going to take these bolts out here that hold the tank in place, back those out, and then we can lift the tank up just enough to get the wires through. I might just go ahead and take the whole tank off just so I can get a good idea of where these wires are going to be. You don't have to do that. You can just snake them through. But I'm going to go ahead and remove the tank just so you can see how it's done. First we'll have our two bolts, one on each side. It's just a 6mm Allen to get both of those out. I'm going to be careful when you take these bolts out, because there's obviously the bolt, there's a rubber bushing on the outside and a washer, and then on the inside there's another rubber bushing and a washer as well. Just keep track of all that. We'll take both of those out. Next we'll remove the vent line. Next we can pull this pop rivet out. Remove the bolt right here with the, takes a 4mm Allen. Depending on the way, we can disconnect this connector right here. Then we'll come to the right side. We can lift our tank up just a little bit. And see, we have our little connection there with the blue tab. Just squeeze that, pull it out. Make sure you have some type of rag ready, because a little bit of gas will spill out, but not too much. So now we can just slide this back. Now we got the tank out of the way, now we can route these wires. Like I said, you don't have to do that step. That just makes routing them back to where everything is much easier. But if you can get them just slid underneath the tank, you don't even need to go inside of this plastic cover, because it does have the nice protective sheath around it. But I'm going to open this up so that way I can route it inside of there with everything else. Alright, to get this plastic sleeve off, it's just a couple tabs. Just pull them out. Down here there is a zip tie that holds it in place. Just cut that. This whole top piece will come off. Now I can run this wire much easier down the handlebar underneath the tank to where everything goes. So now I'm just going to zip tie this in place. Make sure you leave yourself enough play both left and right, so that way you turn the handlebar, you're not pulling on anything. I'll take the cover, put that back on. Alright, before we get the manifold installed, I'm going to get the fuse relay and wiring relay installed. So I'm going to install the fuse relay just on top of the battery cover behind the ECU. Just going to feed these wires through. And the lead coming off the fuse relay will get bolted to the positive terminal on the battery, so we'll have to remove this cover, but I want to get it in place just so I know where everything's going to be at. Same with the relay, just going to install that right here. The rest on the bottom of the battery pad there, and then we'll have all of our wires ready to go wherever they need to go. Alright, now we can get our manifold prepped. On one of the black wires coming out of it, you're going to install one of the supplied male fittings. On the other one, you're going to install a spade terminal. And then we can get our mounting bracket installed as well. One thing to keep in mind, there's not really one best way to get this installed. As you can see, there's threaded holes on both sides of this manifold. There's a couple different patterns here that you can do, because if you have LED lights, some other switch housings, things like that, it might be different than what I'm doing here. Now we'll get our pressure transducer installed, and this is included with the digital switch mount. So if you're using the one that's supplied in the kit, you don't need to worry about this step, but you can either install this either right here where that plug is, just back that plug out, it'll go right in there. How I'm going to mount this, there's really not enough room for that to be in there, as well as the plug coming out the switch. What I'm going to do is install one of the Voss fittings, one of these guys here, use some extra 4mm hose, and I'm going to kind of just use that hose to mount this in a different position to give me enough room to use the connection from the switch to plug it in. Alright, so the two fittings that will accept this Voss are the two down here. One of them is going to be used for the actual airline coming off the shock itself, and the other one we'll use for the pressure transducer. So we can just back that plug out just like that. And I just use the extra line from the shock, because there is plenty of it. I just cut off a little bit from the end. So now that I have that hose in there, take another one of the fittings. Once you got the boss pushed on there, next we can thread the spacer onto the boss, just like that. Then we can take the transducer, and I'm gonna do this, but you do wanna put on some plumber's tape, Teflon tape, thread sealer, whatever. If you don't, that will certainly leak right there, so make sure you do that. Alright, and there it is. Our manifold is fully prepped for installation. We have our pressure transducer installed. That'll just make the connection between this and the actual switch much easier. The air line for the shock will get plugged in right there. We'll go through that process once we have this installed. The air line coming from the compressor will get installed in there again once we get it installed. I'm just going to thread it into the threaded hole on the frame right there. I'm also going to use that same spot for my grounds. So I'll have the ground coming off of the wire relay, the ground coming off of the manifold, and then I'll also use it for the ground coming off the handlebar mounted switch. I'm just going to do this loosely for now, so that way I can maneuver it out of the way when we go to pull the battery cover off. Alright, now I'm going to remove the battery cover, and the vehicle ECU is right on top of the battery cover, so you want to be careful with that. When you pull it out of the way, just make sure it doesn't touch anything metal. Kind of hard to do, so you want to be pretty careful here. Just back that bolt out. It's 5mm. And then all you do is just slide it back out of the hooks and lift it out of the way. We'll connect the spade terminal from the fuse harness to the positive battery post. You can slide the red rubber boot back a little bit and slide the wire through the boot for a cleaner finish and protection. Now slide the battery cover back into position and bolt down the cover and ECU with the Allen head bolt. Here I'm getting the ground wire for the manifold organized and tucked away. Now we can take the 4mm air line coming from the shock and route it back to the manifold and securely seat it into the 4mm fitting. We'll do the same for the 1/4" air line coming from the compressor. I have it routed up and around the inside of the seat housing. You can have it go directly to the 1/4" air line fitting on the manifold, but I couldn't quite get it without the line kinking. Now we're ready to start hooking up all of our wiring connections. There are quite a few connections that have to be made with the additional LED switch, so I'm going to start with all those just to help keep myself organized for everything else. I'll highlight the connection differences for the original switch as we go. First, we'll connect the white-brown switch wire to the orange relay wire. If you're using the original switch, you'll connect the orange relay wire to the orange switch wire. Now we'll connect the brown switch wire to the black manifold wire. If you're using the supplied switch, it'll be the black switch wire to the black manifold wire. Take the white-green switch wire and connect it to the red relay harness wire. The plug relay has 3 red wires. 2 of these wires split from 1 wire. Of these 2, connect the white-green wire to the red wire with the male terminal. If you're using the supplied switch, you can skip these next 2 steps. Connect the orange switch wire to the wire tap we installed earlier. Remember, this line powers the LED. You only want the LED illuminated when the ignition is on, so make sure you tap a wire that only has 12 volt when the key is turned on. Now connect the pressure transducer to the switch plug. Again, you can mount this directly to the manifold, but using some extra air line lets you put it in a spot with more room. Now connect the red fuse harness wire to the split red plug relay wire. Finally, connect the red compressor wire to the 3rd red relay wire. Now is a good time to check for leaks and that everything functions properly. You can spray some soapy water on the airline connections and look for bubbles. If you see any bubbles, that means you have a leak, so you can disconnect that and then try re-wrapping it with some more plumbers or Teflon tape. All right, now we can start reassembly. First, we can slide the fender back into position and reinstall the pop rivets. Finger tighten the push pins on the right side and the 2 Allen bolts on the left. Install the rear trim if equipped using the hex head bolt, and don't forget to include the bushing as well. Reinstall the remaining hex head bolt on both sides along with the bag mounts. Fully tighten the fender support bolts inside the back of the fender. Now go back through and tighten everything down, making sure the fender is square. Install the lower side cover and hook up the antenna. Finally, install the seat and the bags.